What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Paul Davis, who is an author, artist, and award-winning Hollywood filmmaker. Now, as an author, his most recent book is the ambitious 514-page non-fiction An Atheist in Heaven, the ultimate evidence for life after death. It's also co-authored with Professor Gary E. Schwartz, a scientist who is also a prolific author. Paul joins me today to discuss the ultimate evidence for life after death and much more. Paul Davis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for inviting me on.
I'm so glad to have made contact with you. I really am. Before we start this interview, obviously you've got a really interesting background as well with a sort of Hollywood connection. Can you just tell us a bit about your background in Hollywood and what you've been up to?
Well, I've had a long career there. It started out at the American Film Institute, Center for Advanced Film Studies. And a couple of years after graduating their program, I worked for F. Lee Bailey on his show Lie Detector. Then the big one was production coordinator of the original Transformers cartoons. There's about 80 cartoons with my name on it as production coordinator. I wrote a bunch of those. Then I got a deal to write a lot of Star Wars books for Lucasfilm, 6 of them. I wrote them with my wife, and there was a special British edition of those. They start with the glove of Darth Vader, and they end with the prophets of the dark side. So after that, I had written a small film called She Dances Alone about Nijinsky. But the first major one was Roswell for Showtime with Kyle MacLachlan, Martin Sheen, about the purported flying saucer crash in New Mexico in 1947. From there, it was one independent film after another. There's been about 10 of them now.
Wow.
In the last 15 years.
That-
I've dealt with Van Gogh,
Yep.
Vincent Van Gogh, and Timothy Leary, the LSD guru, and shamanism, and Was Jesus in India? I did a movie called Jesus in India. The history of special effects was the Sci-Fi Boys. I did a Latino movie called Before We Say Goodbye, a Life After Death project, and a sequel to that. And it goes on and on and on.
Absolutely. Now, the Roswell movie, that was a classic film. That was. We're just showing a clip of it now on the screen. That was a film that woke me up on the Roswell case. I've got a copy of that movie, and it's still available. It's a great. I mean, that's a story in its own right. That is how you got into doing that. And I know we've not got no time to talk about that, but yeah, wow, that's a cool one.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it excites you, and I'm very proud of that film, and I think it comes very close to the truth, although there are a lot of governments that may not admit that.
Oh, I've had a lot of Roswell people on, and I think people like Don Schmidt would definitely say that's very close to the truth, that film.
Well, Don Schmidt, actually, it was based on a book that he co-wrote.
That says a lot then, yeah. Yeah, no, Don Schmidt's a good friend, and I'd like to class him as, and okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe we should get you both back on for that at one point in the future, most definitely. In Star Wars, what did you think about the new Star Wars movie?
Oh, I loved it. It really did it for me.
Good.
And I love the actress who played Rey. I thought couldn't take my eyes off her. And the new little robot, the round one.
Oh, it was great, wasn't it? Yeah. I couldn't. The hardest thing for me was Han Solo passing away. We had all these iconic figures back on the screen, and then he always wanted to do. He always wanted to be killed off in the last movie. I know he did. But
let me ask you something. Did you actually see him die, or did you see him get hit with the laser and fall? Because when we were doing Transformers, we destroyed Optimus Prime in one show, and we took a lot of flack for that. And then later we had the return of Optimus Prime, and we had to reconstruct it atom by atom.
Well, that's it. Apparently, I don't know if he's in the new movie as a sort of ghost figure, coming back to give advice or something. I don't know. I'm guessing in the Star Wars universe, maybe anything's possible. It just seemed like look, I'm looking forward to the next one. Most definitely. Did he die or not? Well, he fell, didn't he? But that was it. He vanished. But actually, I got to see the new Star Wars trailer for the Rogue One film that's coming out in December. I don't know if you've seen that trailer yet.
I haven't.
Looks really, really dark and really good, and Darth Vader's back in it as well, which is just absolutely awesome. Good. So yeah, and Transformers. I mean, Christ, I remember those as a kid. I mean. Yeah, wow, you were working on those. I mean, that's not easy doing kids storylines. It cannot be easy at all.
Oh no, but it was a great experience being aboard for all of those shows. I mean, Literally 79 of them have my name on it. That's how many I worked on.
That's incredible.
So that was sort of the beginning of things for me. And
yes,
I was fortunate that after a lot of these experiences that I finally got to make the films I wanted to make and write this new book, which we're going to be talking about.
We are
An Atheist in Heaven.
Absolutely, because without any of that, like you say, you wouldn't have done what you did now. It gave you that platform to do what you're doing now. Now, with all that we've just spoken about, sci-fi and everything else, where the heck does doing a subject like this, An Atheist in Heaven, fit in there? Did you ever have any clue that you would do something like this? Was it ever in the background? You sound like you've done some spiritual documentaries in a sense. What part of you in you is drawing you to do this?
Well, I've gone through sort of an evolution. I started out life as an agnostic materialist, pragmatist. I wasn't really raised religiously, and it really wasn't part of my consciousness or emphasis for a long, long time. I got interested in related things along the way. I got interested in shamanism when I spent time in Sedona, Arizona. And when I worked on the show Lie Detector, one of the sequences that I worked on, we brought in a psychic detective named Dorothy Allison from New Jersey, who was simply a phenomenon. And there was for me, I have a pretty critical mind, but there was no debunking what she had accomplished in terms of solving certain murder cases. So that opened up my mind to the idea that, well, maybe contact with those that have passed on is possible. I mean, this seemed to be evidence for it. A departed spirit reaching out to this psychic. The main case she brought to us was really pretty ironclad, and it had resulted in her finding a missing body. But it wasn't until years after that that I really got directly involved. That was about 1983.
Oh, okay.
Now, Forrest Ackerman, my mentor, passed away in 2008. So what we're talking like, my math isn't good. Is it 25 years?
It's something like that. But with this gentleman you just mentioned there, so how do you pronounce his name? I've got Forrest Ackerman, but you Forrest.
Yes. Everybody called him Forrest.
Right.
A lot of people called him Uncle Forrest.
Uncle Forrest, but his actual name was Forrest.
Yes,
Right.
Forrest
Now, just
J. Ackerman.
for those who don't know who Forrest J. Ackerman is and how you got connected with him, just tell us a bit about this gentleman.
Okay, and I should say at the beginning, we could spend a whole show on Forrest J. Ackerman. We won't. And I did make a film that talked about his contribution to science fiction, and that film is The Sci-Fi Boys.
Right.
I know it's been on TV in England, Sky B, and is available.
Yes.
Forrest Ackerman was born in the days of the silent movies, 1916, and he took to science fiction and horror movies very, very quickly, and he became the first scholar expert on the whole field of science fiction, horror, and fantasy cinema. And he was a great collector of all of the props, everything he could get his hands on from the movies. And he filled an 18-room house with all of these things. He called it the Ackerman Mansion. Now, it's key to know that he was the editor of a magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland, still being published. First issue was 1958. He was aboard. It was a James Warren publication originally, and the two of them made these magazines, about 200 issues, that gave the secrets behind the movie monsters, and yet Forrest's sense of humor was a key thing to this. He loved puns. He had funny captions to the pictures about the monsters, so it really appealed particularly to kids. And I was a kid when I first fell in love with his magazine. So I wrote to him. I met him at a science fiction convention when I was 13 in Washington, D.C. He had a movie contest in the magazine, and I was a young teenage entry into that contest, and I was a winner, and he wrote up about my 8mm movie in the magazine. Issue 27 and then issue 35. Wow. If collectors want to go look for it, you still find them. But the thing is, it really inspired me that making films and being connected with someone in Hollywood like Forrest, that this is something that could be my future. Because everyone I knew discouraged that completely. You had to be a professor, a doctor, or a lawyer if you were growing up in suburban Maryland in the environment that I come from. So I bucked that, and I after I graduated Princeton University, I went to the American Film Institute to study, and then did have a career in film and television.
Okay, so when later on in life then did you get back in contact with Forrest then?
Well, I got in contact with Forrest as soon as I was a student at the American Film Institute, the AFI. I went to his Ackerman Mansion many times. I arranged for him to give a seminar at the AFI along with the great, great producer George Pal, who did The War of the Worlds and The Time Machine and many other films. They were together. It was heaven. You want to talk about heaven? That was heaven.
You got to meet the director of A Time Machine. Oh my God!
Well, actually, I worked with him. He wanted me to write the script or the treatment for The Hobbit, and I was like the first writer on The Hobbit. George Pal got me involved with that, and we were turned down by everybody in those days. That was a long time ago. I mean, he passed away in 1980. So this is something, in the last couple of years of his life he was trying to do, way ahead of its time, because, of course, eventually Peter Jackson did a wonderful job with that.
Absolutely, he did. Absolutely.
But you were asking about, getting back in touch with Forrest. I visited the Ackerman Mansion, and then we were in touch for decades. He had a new magazine called Monsterland. He had me writing for that. He wrote a preface to my first book, or an introduction to a book called The Fires of Pele, Mark Twain's legendary lost journal. First book I ever published. And Stan Lee wrote the preface, Fari's foreword or introduction. So, we kept in touch. And, the crowning night was in 1986, I think, when he invited me to dinner at the Ackerman Mansion, my wife and I, to meet Ray Harryhausen, the great Ray Harryhausen, who spent most of his life in London and made the films like the Sinbad movies and Jason and the Argonauts, the great, great special effects master. So for me, this was the fulfillment of a lot of dreams. I was very close to Forrest. It was very sad when he got very old. He had to give up the big house, move to a smaller bungalow for the last few years. And he was an atheist. He didn't believe in anything paranormal, didn't believe in a God. He didn't believe in life after death, didn't even believe in flying saucers, although he, wrote about them plenty. And he wrote about zombies and Dracula and the undead and ghosts. But for him, it was all fiction, just fiction. So we got to talking about it at one point, and he said, I tell you what, if it turns out when Prince Sirki comes to take me, that's the way he would talk about death. Prince Sirki was death for him. It must come from some movie. I don't know what movie. So when Prince Sirki comes to take me, if it turns out that I wake up to some big science fiction convention in the sky, I'll be partying. I'll be back with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. Peter Lorre, my wife Wendane. I'll be very busy. But when things quiet down a little bit, he said, maybe I would drop you a line, but don't count on it. He said, don't count on it, because he didn't believe in this at all.
Okay.
And the facts after he died completely turned my life around. I mean, my life has not been the same since he died.
No. Okay. Would you say then that that potentially that this what we're going to talk about tonight as well in the case of Forrest, in the book that you've written, this is really, in your opinion, the ultimate evidence for life after death?
I think so. Now, I put a question mark in that subtitle, the ultimate evidence for life after death, because I didn't want to paint myself as the ultimate authority. For me, it is, and I think that open-minded people, even skeptics and scientists looking at this, will look at all the evidence and say that we can't explain this. We don't have the tools in our current scientific understanding to know how and why these things have been happening, but they have been happening. And actually, I took a sworn, notarized statement, put that at the beginning of the book to make it very clear that everything I've accounted for in the book as happened, it really did happen. Nothing was made up. It's all true.
Okay. Now, I may have this wrong, but I believe before Forrest came to you, he actually went to Mike MacDonald and Ian Johnston. Is that true? That they had the first experience? Right. Okay. Let's just start from there then as well.
Ian, Paul Johnston, and Mike MacDonald are Canadian filmmakers, and they made a documentary biography of Forrest for Canadian television. And I think it was called something like Famous Monster, the Forrest J. Ackerman story. And after Forrest died, it was December 4th, 2008, it was a couple months went by, and Forrest's caretaker and best pal for the last 10 years or so, a fellow named Joe Mo, arranged a big tribute at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood for Forrest. Invited a lot of people who loved him, to speak. And he invited Mike and Ian to come down from Canada to show their film about Forrest that night. So they were in town. They were staying at a hostel in Hollywood. And they visited his crypt. And, you have to understand Forrest was a very playful and mischievous person, had a great sense of humor. So when Mike MacDonald rapped on the crypt and said, "Hi, Forrest, it's us," they didn't see it as something disrespectful. They felt, well, Forrest, he would smile at something like that. Well, it was within about an hour after that, when they returned to the hostel, that they heard from him. And there's no explanation for what happened, but on Mike McDonald's computer, he was trying to blog something, and a CAPTCHA code came up before they let him blog on Facebook, and the CAPTCHA code was Ackerman's name. It was Ackerman 000. And this really shocked him, because those are supposed to be random things. You know, the CAPTCHA code with the squiggles of the letters and the words to make sure you're not spamming.
That's right. Yep.
And then they talked about it in shock, and he sort of said, is he really dead? And a voice came out of Ian's computer, the computer was asleep at that time, but a voice came out that said, "Oh my gosh, no way." Just timed perfectly to be an answer to what they had said. Childlike voice. And he had a picture of Fari as a child as his screensaver on the screen. Well, as he said, my computer had no business talking to me, but it did. And it was one of these animated emoticons that you can find on the internet. You can find a little smiley face saying, "Oh my gosh, no way," and then rolling over. But he wasn't on the internet at the time. And why at the exact moment, to be the reply to the... So, they were both shocked. Ian was the skeptic before this. Mike was the one who said, he lived in a house with ghosts, so he had no problem with it. And they thought, their theory was, here at the Egyptian Theater, almost 1,000 people were coming in, focusing on the life of Forrest J. Ackerman. What if there really is a life after, and and he exists as a spirit, and he was going to make contact? What better time than right then, when the whole focus was on his life story? So that's what started.
How did they get in contact with you, though, to pass that information across?
Oh, that was easy, because I was a speaker at the Tribute.
Okay.
I was in good company. You see, Ray Bradbury was a speaker, and John Landis, and Guillermo del Toro was a speaker. Right. And I'm sure I'm leaving out some very important people who were speakers, but they asked me to be a speaker, and I met the two guys that night. I saw their film. They also showed a clip from the Sci-Fi Boys that night of Fari going to George Pal's grave and reading the what would you say? The eulogy he had written for George Pal when George Pal died. So that clip was shown. Ian and Mike's movie was shown. We got together, and I learned their story.
Now, in the documentary as well, which we're going to talk about in a bit, we've got a number of pictures we're going to put up on screen as well, and talk around them as well. But also, that I believe that when you eventually did the documentary, you got to interview the nurses that were there when Fari passed, and they had a unique story as well.
Well, Earl Roselle is not a certified nurse, but he was there when Fari passed with the hospice workers. And it turned out that Fari passed at right around 2 minutes to midnight.
The hospice workers, sorry, yes, that's what I meant to say. Yeah,
everybody saw that. That they said that he had been lying in bed, and that he sat up in bed, his eyes opened wide. They said it was like he was seeing something. He took one last deep breath, and they said sort of gently lowered his body back down, to the head on the pillow, and that was his last breath. He was gone. Now, there had been a painting of Fari that was made by an artist named L.J. Dopp, D-O-P-P. Very good artist, by the way. Look him up online. He's got a lot of great paintings. But the painting he did of Fari 4 years before Fari died had a clock in the background with the hands of the clock at 2 minutes to midnight, which 4 years later turns out to be the exact time that he died.
Oh, my gosh.
Now that you can put in the category of, that's quite a coincidence. What's happened, Kevin, and this is all documented in my book, An Atheist in Heaven, is there's been over 100 strange incidents involving Fari since he passed. And some of these you might put into a category of coincidence or synchronicity, but extraordinary synchronicity. And when it gets to a point when there's been so many of them, you have to start asking, well, this is strange. But it wasn't just the synchronicity. You see, my co-author, this is very important, and we have a picture of him, Gary Schwartz. He's written many books about life after death. Ph.D. from Harvard, taught at Yale, teaches now at University of Arizona in Tucson. And he's worked with mediums. He's studied these phenomena, and he's pointed out that you can sort of break it down into 4 categories of evidence for life after death. There's the research on reincarnation. Well, we don't get into that much in my studies, really, at all. There is the field of after-death communication. This is part of what's been going on with Fari. This includes messages from somebody that's been deceased. And many people have this kind of experience with a loved one. It's not that rare. But with Fari, many things have happened. There's what they call the instrumental transcommunication is where a computer or a camera or a television screen, some instrumentality is used apparently for someone on the other side to communicate with us. And that would include electronic voice phenomenon, EVP. So let's see, what am I leaving out? There's a physical phenomena. And physical phenomena would be like the things that have happened to me, where there was an ink message that started it, or a mask of Fari's face. While I'm gone for a short while, the mask has been in the same place for 4 years, but I come back and it's moved 10 feet across the room, and there was nobody there to move it. Or physical things that happen with computers. So, well, and that's also instrumental transcommunication. So there are all these different fields of research, and as Gary Schwartz likes to say, science likes the consilience of data from varying fields, each one tending to support the other. So it's one thing you can have one incident and say, well, it was a coincidence, right? But if you've got dozens of coincidences and you've got physical phenomena, you've got after-death communication, you've got instrumental transcommunication, there comes a point where you say, this is real. It's real.
So do you think he's still communicating with you now?
Absolutely. The things that have happened have continued right up to the present. And not just to me. They seem to happen to people. Watch out, Kevin. Be on the lookout. They happen to people that I am connected with about this research.
Right.
Even some people who had seen the film, The Life After Death Project, or this one lady who I know very well, who was reading An Atheist in Heaven, and so many things happened to her all of a sudden that related to Fari that were just impossible. And she recounted it to me. A friend within the last 2 weeks got an email from a horror director who's been deceased since 2012. The email was dated 2012. It was written back then, but it just landed in his inbox now with 150 names that he sent it to, which would be people that, would be interested in An Atheist in Heaven. So very convenient. It's like a deceased director who's a friend of Fari. He did a film about Bela Lugosi, sends me his email list 4 years after he's died.
So there's been activity at your house. Now, do you have any pets?
We have a cat.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
Yep, we have a cat.
And have they sensed anything going on, or been acting unusual sometimes, with looking into places where there's nothing, but they seem to see something, or?
I think that has probably happened, but I haven't focused it as being this,
No.
because it could be a raccoon,
Of
could be a
course.
possum outside. Our cat is more interested in possums and raccoons than ghosts, I think. But things have happened in my house, and Kevin, one of the reasons is when there was the auction of the estate sale of Fari's things in May after he died, I was there and I bought much of the memorabilia that he had. I bought 15 large binders of files and clippings and his birth certificate and the first newsletters he did back in the 1920s about science fiction. I mean, all of that's now in my house, along with lots of paintings of him, the mask of his face, photos of him. I mean, so I became the caretaker of these things. There's a lot of this man now in my house.
Okay, so there's a... Okay, now we can either go to the pictures now, or we could talk about some of the pinnacle bits of evidence.
Well, let's talk our way through the pictures. Let me say a little
Sure.
something about each of them, so you'll know what to say. You have the posters of the Life After Death project, and I'll just say, let me make a comment first. Before I wrote the book, An Atheist in Heaven, with Gary Schwartz, I made a documentary film about all of this. It was released in 2013, still available, of course, called The Life After Death Project. A lot of key people helped me with it. People like the great author Richard Matheson and Whitley Strieber and Dannion Brinkley, who's very well known in this field, and of course Gary Schwartz. And the film was on the Sci-Fi Channel, which had also shown the Sci-Fi Boys. Incidentally, let me say parenthetically that the Sci-Fi Boys documented the history of special effects in motion pictures, sort of hosted by Peter Jackson, and certainly showed the profound influence that Forrest Ackerman had in the development of the whole field. So first came the documentary film. Now we have An Atheist in Heaven. It's 500 pages with photos and some charts and some scientific reports. It's a major piece of work. I documented it all. I was asked to by people in the academic world who'd seen the movie, and they said the movie's very curious and extraordinary, but for those of us who are in academic fields and scientists, we really need to have a book, something we can sit down and say, this has been documented in a way that we can study it. Is it annotated? We can research it. So that started the book, Atheist in Heaven, and it was 3 years in the writing. The first thing that happened to me that was so out of the ordinary, you have a photo of. I call it the Extraordinary Ink Blot. And there's so much that could be said about this ink blot, but I'm going to try to keep it simple and say that within a week or so after Fari's tribute, I had a document I had printed out, and I was in we have a home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was alone. And while I was alone in the house and out of the room where I'd put this document, and I knew the document, the ink was dry, it had been printed out 2 hours before, I was alone in the house, and 4 words in the document were changed. 2 words you could sort of read, see through, but 2 words were completely blacked out. When I was in shock. There was no one there who physically could have done it. It was like the closest encounter with, dare I say, a ghost, that anybody could have, because I don't know any other explanation. The NSA has a lot of technology, but I don't think the National Security Agency can reach into somebody's house and change a document without being physically there yet. I don't think, but this was real, and it was very neatly blacked out. You see, this wasn't water dripping from a ceiling. This wasn't some leaky pen near the bed. This was deliberate. You knew it was deliberate immediately, so it had to be a message. It took me a while to figure out the message, and what I figured out was this was Fari using his love of puns and his words within words to send me a little message that was like a thank you for the tribute. It was as simple as that, but it was a message literally from another world. But I didn't jump to that conclusion right away. I went to scientists, and I think you've got some pictures of some of them here. Let me look for a minute and see. First, you have a picture of Dr. J. Siegel. I went to first, the chairman of the chemistry department at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. Long name for a university. But Dr. J. Siegel is a monument in the field, particularly in forensic chemistry. All the books he's been written that relate to the use of chemistry in solving crimes. I hand-delivered the document with the ink obliteration on it to him to do research, and he began the research. He called in a colleague. You have a photo of the colleague.
Yes.
He called in Dr. John Allison, chemistry professor at the College of New Jersey, who used to work with J. Siegel at Michigan State University. These two are like the top experts in inks, paints, and solvents. They had a special grant to study and categorize hundreds and hundreds of solvents and inks, and they felt they'd be able to figure out what caused this, what it was all about, pretty quickly. Well, they were not. The top scientists using the top scientific equipment at their disposal, including laser desorption, they were able to get to the bottom of what the chemistry of the ink was. There were a few molecules in there that really surprised them. The thing that really shocked them was that they could never, in 3 years of research, find any solvent that could make that ink that would be there on the printer get dark enough to black out two of the words completely. There wasn't enough ink there to do it. And this really was a puzzle for them, because I know that the document was normal. I had inspected it beforehand. A printer error is absolutely out of the question. So we've had 3 years of research, and not only has science not gotten to the bottom of it, but as you will read in An Atheist in Heaven, Dr. John Allison has had spooky incident after spooky incident happen to him since he began this research. And it happened from the very beginning when I went there to bring the document. It was caught on camera when a clock that no longer worked chimed right in the background. And he itemizes all of the really weird and inexplicable things that have happened to him, and his life has been turned around by this too. Let's talk about some other photos.
Sure.
There is a photo there, was the last photo taken of me with Forrest J. Ackerman, actually taken on Halloween of 2008. So I saw him last about 5 weeks before he passed away. And I think Forry was on oxygen then, and he was very frail. But his mind was still, very alert. He hadn't lost anything mentally. Here's somebody who was this scholar, this sponge of information about the whole history of science fiction and horror movies. And these were, those were his last weeks, and that was my last time with him. You also have a photo there of me with Forry. I'm holding a piece of paper. And this was back when I was working on the Transformers show. When I was now working in the business, I was, I thought I was an important guy in television. I don't know if anybody else thought so, but I would go to the Ackerman Mansion and share with Forry storyboards, and we had a close relationship. There is a photo labeled Brian, Paul, Forry, Hall, and Basil. That photo that has me and my wife Hollis on either side of Forry Ackerman, and also Basil Gogos, who painted a lot of the famous Monsters covers, and Brian Lambert, a music composer who has done the scores for many of my films, including the Sci-Fi Boys. That was taken the night that Sci-Fi Boys had a premiere, sponsored by Universal Pictures. Coincidentally, that was at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood, where just two and a half years later, we would be having the tribute for Forry. Okay, let me go on and tell you what else. One of the let me do a different way. Several of the odd incidents that have happened have involved masks. It's interesting that Forry was a major collector of masks of all kinds, including movie masks and masks that would be heirlooms. I had in my house in Santa Fe, at the time the ink obliteration happened, a mask from Zimbabwe, Africa. It was a genuine tribal mask that had been, as they say, danced in a ceremony there. My partner, Todd Mills, that produced Timothy Leary's Dead with me, bought this mask in Africa. Eventually it ended up in my house. And the day after the ink incident happened, I had someone come over to the house with an electromagnetic field reader. And there were a lot of anomalies surrounding this mask, which was just across the wall from where the ink blot happened. Scared the living Jesus out of me, because not only were we getting EMF readings from the mask that was going off the charts, but on that day, and it's never happened again, but as I stood near the mask and this meter was pointed at my brain, the EMF reader was going off the charts, pointed at me. And, this was really scary, scary stuff. I want to tell you, Kevin, I wanted the mask out of my house. That afternoon, I had someone take it. I'm so scared of it, I didn't want it in the house anymore. Now it's at the College of New Jersey with Dr. John Allison. But when we filmed the mask, we also got EVP, electronic voice phenomena.
Wow. Okay, what did that say?
Oh, that was incredible, because was
it quite clear?
Totally clear, and it was one word. While the meter was going from my head to the mask and back to my head, a voice says, Lenore. Just like that, the name Lenore. Well, look, Fari publicized every Edgar Allan Poe movie ever made. We've all read The Raven, which is the mourning for the lost love Lenore. And Edgar Allan Poe also wrote a poem called Lenore. The name Lenore makes everyone think of Poe, and with the closeness of Poe and what he represented in life and Fari's respect for him, I felt like, wait a minute, if there's spirits talking to me now, is Edgar Allan Poe checking in on this? And it was so bizarre that one of the after effects of this, look, I had written a little poetry in college. I had won an award at Princeton for a poem, and I hadn't written poems in decades. Suddenly, after the word Lenore comes, within the 2 years or so after that, I've written 3 entire books of poetry. We're talking 450 pages, all published. I didn't plan to do that, but, look, as long as we're speculating, I'll speculate maybe I had some help from Edgar. I don't know.
It's possible, isn't it? It's possible. Do you think that you've become a lot more accepting of not the impossible, but options that present themselves when we consider that if consciousness continues, maybe what else is possible?
Kevin, I've become completely open to it. At one point in my life, I was very closed. You would call me a debunker. And I've surrendered to this openness very slowly. I've gone kicking and screaming towards it, because at every opportunity I've tried to find logical explanations for the things that happen. Those explanations have not come. I brought scientists into it. I'm caught in the middle of a mystery I never asked for, I never expected, but I feel a responsibility fell on my shoulders with so many debunkers out there who don't believe any of this, to document everything, to give them the scientific chemical reports and all of the research and experimentation done since the Fari contacts begun, and we put it all into An Atheist in Heaven. This is an ultimate challenge to skeptics and non-believers, because they may decide not to read it, they may decide to ignore it. They cannot explain it.
Do you think that Fari is bringing in anything through to you in the sense of, okay, well, if consciousness continues, what's it mean the way you're living your life in the moment now, potentially? Not that you're answerable to anything greater than yourself, but what does it mean in the sense of your potential of what you could do in this life?
Well, that's a really big question, and I think it probably has a really big answer. First, I think Fari's purpose in this, because I've come to accept
let's get to that. Yeah, that's a really good point.
He did still exist. When he was alive, he was not only this collector of horror and science fiction memorabilia. What was science fiction? It was the writings of what we thought the future would be. Fari was a futurist. He reached out for what could come to pass. All these things that were in Star Trek, some of them we have now, like the communicators and other things, they've come true. Fari in the 1930s with Ray Bradbury insisted and made public their belief that man would walk on the moon in their lifetime. and they were ridiculed. They were considered kooks for that belief. The New York Times wrote an article saying that flight in space with a rocket would be impossible because there was nothing for the flame to push against in space. In other words, science has been wrong a lot, and Forrest was a futurist, always on the cutting edge of what could be. So I think of all people I can think of who would want to get the word back to those of us still in the body, it would be Forrest. So it was a mission. It was a determination and a mission when he realized that he was wrong. And, some people have said to me, Paul, don't you think you're doing Forrest a disservice because he was an atheist and he didn't believe this stuff when he was alive? And now you're saying he's changed his mind after he's dead when he came. Well, look, let me just say, one friend said when he heard I was doing this, he said, "Oh my gosh, Forrest is going to kill you when you die."
Yeah, but it's just as bad though, isn't it? It's just as bad as not publishing it, because that's just saying, well, I'm not saying the attacks you've had on you in the sense that, Forrest's not there to defend himself. Well, it's just as bad as for you to not go forward with this book, because this is what's come through. So you can't win either way, but at least you've been true to yourself to say, well, this is the facts. Yes. This is what's happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know these.
And I've been true to science.
Absolutely.
I've done everything I could do to try to have science disprove it.
Do you think that's why he's come through you in a sense, because he knew that's the way you would approach it? This is an agreement you guys have had before you came down here, and you've kept on with that agreement with free will, and because you have approached it from that point of view.
I think he knew me really, really well. He also knew Ian and Mike. Ian and Mike made a documentary film about his life. When he saw that film, he saw it before he died, he said to them, "Well, I guess I can go now. You've told my whole life." So, and he didn't mean go like leave the room. He meant like leave the body.
I think.
And with me, I did. I'm sorry, I just finished this up. I did the Sci-Fi Boys. And that showed how his incredible influence in this field had influenced Lucas and Spielberg and Peter Jackson and Guillermo del Toro and Dennis Muren, who now has 10 Academy Awards or so, and Rick Baker, he has about 10 Academy Awards. In other words, this whole growth of science fiction and special effects and the people who went on in this field were all inspired by Forrest, who made them understand it was important and they could do it. So Forrest came to filmmakers first. He came to the people that made films about him, Ian and Mike and me. Because if there was a word to get out, he knew he could trust us that we'd be the ones that would get the word out.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah. Well, look what a film like Star Wars does. I mean, not only does it deal with, the ideas of the technology in it as well. What's the possibility that we, a long time ago in a far, far away galaxy, not even in this realm. Do you know what I mean? In the sense of time frames. But I mean the Force as well. The idea of this binding thing that surrounds us all. This consciousness. The continuation of life in a sense.
It's a brilliant way to get the philosophy apart. Yeah. Let's talk about a few more of the pictures. I don't know how much more time we have, but I do want to finish itemizing.
Absolutely, I want to get to that as well. But just before we do as well, just very, very quickly, do you think this is the pinnacle of what Forrest is going to bring forth? Because I almost feel that there's maybe more to this message than just this. Well, I mean, what if that there's someone's going to take the reins on this and maybe do some creative writing and bring out something even more from Forrest in a sense?
I've given up trying to predict it. The things that have happened have all surprised me. I've never expected any of them specifically.
Right.
When we held a seance in the Ackerman mansion, we went back to the original Ackerman mansion. The owner said the place is haunted and he wanted some specialists there and wanted to get to the bottom of it. And we had Suzanne Wilson and Jamie Clark run a seance in the house. And we had a skeptical scientist there, and nobody expected that the couch that he was sitting in was going to start vibrating in the middle of the seance so much that he was in shock. And let me tell you, I checked that couch to see if there were any devices or anything. No. And it was a spirit message. You never know what message is going to come.
No.
I was shocked the other day when the lady who designs my website, who's reading the book, swears to me that while she was reading the book and she put it down and she talked to Fari for a minute, like she was feeling affectionate towards him. And she said all of a sudden her phone that she was reading the book on started blinking, getting brighter and dimmer and brighter and dimmer. It started advancing on its own to a page in the book that she hadn't selected. She tried to write me an email to tell me about this, and she wrote the name Fari, and she said the name Ackerman came up on the screen immediately. In her email, she didn't even type his last name.
No.
Come on.
No.
Come on.
Yeah.
There's no way that this just happens.
No.
I got over 100 incidents. This is real. Let's start dealing for the fact that it's real.
And there would have been multiple other cases of similar things happening with other deceased loved ones as well, for people that have never reported it as well. I mean, this isn't just a Forrest case. This is, everyone's case. But
it's everyone's case, because in working on the movie and the book, I talked to so many people to ask them, has anything like this happened to you? And the answer is yes, when my uncle died. Yes, when my mother died. Yes, when my best friend in college died. People have these experiences, but they don't know what to do with them.
We're going to get into the pictures. Sorry, I know I'm only interrupting because we've got no time here whatsoever. Right? I'm sorry about this, right? But what other books, just quickly, did this journey make you want to read any other books from any other teachers, in a sense, or people that have had similar experiences, or other people in this field? Have you?
Yes, I have a large library of books about life after death, including collecting some of the really old ones from the days of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a believer, who created Sherlock Holmes. And, it's a large library. Some of these are, they're out of print. They're original editions of having to do with mediums or seances back in the days when they really took spiritualism seriously, before materialism and science came in and tried to put an end to all of that.
Okay. That answers that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go back to the pictures. Apologies for that.
Okay, so I think there's some more to talk about. The one that says "Great Photo," front Peter Jackson. Okay, it's a photo of Peter Jackson sitting right next to Forrest J. Ackerman. It was at Universal Pictures Golden Globe Awards party, a year that Peter was nominated for one of the Lord of the Rings movies. So you have Forrest J. Ackerman and Peter in the front row, and behind him, from the left, there's Basil Gogos, who painted so many of the Famous Monsters covers. Then you have Rick Baker. Fari, from the time Rick Baker was a little boy, called him Rick Baker, Monster Maker. And Rick Baker has about 10 Academy Awards to prove it. Next to him is Bob Burns, another great collector of these science fiction items. Bob, for many years, owned the original armature inside from the inside of King Kong, the original 1933 King Kong. And then I'm standing up next to them. So that was our group. We all had this bond. And Peter Jackson helped me so much when it came to making the Sci-Fi Boys by being the host of that movie. Okay, next picture, Ian Paul Johnston. You have a picture of Ian there. We've talked about their movie. Next, we haven't talked a lot about Joe Moe. Joe Moe is very important in this. There's several pictures of Joe Moe here, and also someone named Sean Fernald. They were very close friends of Fari. Joe arranged with others the tribute for Fari, and he took care of Fari those last 10 years. And the message to me in the blotted out ink I've determined was intended to be telling me that he spoke to Joe Moe, that Fari spoke to Joe Moe after the tribute. And by gosh, Joe will say, yes, there was an apparition. Yes, it was as if Fari came to him, thanked him for the tribute. It was more real than reality itself. And was it a surreal dream? He's a skeptic. He didn't know. He didn't know whether he could believe it or not. And then Fari was gone, and just the memory of him. And I think with Joe Moe's doubt about that I was triggered, notified. Yeah, by the way, Paul, I spoke to Joe Moe. Said I'd drop you a line, also spoke to Joe. So uncanny, but Joe is very important. Okay, a couple other pictures. You got a picture of me looking very serious straight at the camera. It was taken. That picture of me was taken in Rome when I was making Jesus in India. Next to that, a very contemplative photo of me in my office. in Highland Park, Los Angeles. There's also a photo of me with my wife, Hollis. I'm holding the Saturn Award that we had just won for Best DVD for the Sci-Fi Boys from the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror. Going down is a picture of me in my producer's chair from when I was making Roswell for Showtime. The next picture over from that is Catherine Yunt, one of the several psychics that we worked with in trying to get communication from the other side. She didn't know it was Forrest J. Ackerman we wanted to contact with. She just knew someone by the first name of Forrest, and so much relevant stuff came through.
Absolutely. And the Life After Death project, is that available as VOD or Netflix, or how would you?
Yes, it's easy to find in the United States. I think it's probably easy to find in England too. I mean, Amazon has it in the United States. You can go to my website. We send it out. We get orders for it, which is www.lifeafterdeathproject.com. And in the United States, it streams online on Amazon. Not part 2, though. Part 2, you have to get the DVD in order to see. That's not online yet.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Wow, Christ. I mean, how do we sum this up? Well, what would you say then, maybe, is the most important message of your work?
Well, I've worked on a lot of controversial subjects, from flying saucers to was Jesus in India, and I have one about the Virgin of Guadalupe. And Vincent van Gogh. I like to pick these big, interesting subjects, usually about unusual people who were maybe scorned or belittled in their own time, not taken seriously, but that they deserved a momentous acclaim. In this case, the take-home message is that, as evidenced in this case of Forrest J. Ackerman, his body became deceased. His spirit continued in a form in which he could communicate with people still here. In different cities, didn't matter where they were. He could leave physical evidence. He retained his sense of humor because he often did it in a way that reflected that smile that always lurked beneath the surface with his wordplay, his puns. So it's a hopeful message. Life goes on and we retain our personality and, we can still have contact with our loved ones. But what is that life after, and where is it? And what form does it have? What frequency is it on? Is heaven a physical place, or is it right here? We don't know any of that, So it would be nice to use some of the tools of science to learn more about it. But first, scientists have to start taking the whole subject seriously and stop debunking.
Yes, and I think this whole idea of really trying to express what, where we're going to, perhaps where we've come from to have this experience and then to go back to it, but where we're going back to, maybe no book has really emphasized or really described exactly what it's like, because it's just that framework hasn't come into our reality yet of what the possibility is of that framework.
Kevin, I hope your listeners will read An Atheist in Heaven. I understand in the UK, Amazon has it as an ebook, and then there is a hardback being offered in the United States, again by Amazon.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we've been putting the book on the screen all throughout the interview as well, and as you say, that they can order that from Amazon and all good bookstores as well. To be honest with you, I think the book will be available from.
Eventually, maybe the bookstores too, but they'll have to discover it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It starts this way with Amazon.
And if people want to get in contact with you, they can do via your website.
Yes. There's a website that includes all my work as an artist, because I'm also a painter with a large body of work. Vincent van Gogh has influenced me in more ways than just making a movie about him. pauldavids-artist.com. It has the art, it has my books, it has my movies, a couple of stage plays. All the information is there, and there's a way to contact me through that. that website.
Excellent. Well, Paul Davis, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure to have you on with someone with all the work that you've done as well and that you continue doing. It's you've touched a lot of people's lives that you're probably not aware of as well. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm glad we were able to do it.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.